on this issue. I was reluctant to agree to be on the panel because I don't really know what I think of these things. I know from my experience at West Valley, we were able to get a feasibility study, to do a feasibility study, to do a health study, and ended up finding out that it wasn't feasible to do a study. And then there was a little study that was done that sort of showed something, but for some reason that was used against us in many ways. And so what this is a look at is an overview of what a health study can do. And it gives us 3 different types of health studies. It's going to outline why they find nothing and alternatives to health studies, which like surveys and things. And then, oh, and who does them? There's a nice chart here that shows these agencies. This is David Osnoff. Why are you laughing? Because it's funny?
Cool.
Definition of public health data. Health effects so powerful, even epidemiological studies.
That's not
so
cool. David
Osnoff is a great guy. My health study. Do you want to say things?
Well,
you say things.
Listen, just before we continue, if you don't mind,
yes,
I'd like to make a few general remarks, okay? That definition, if you read it, right?
Yes.
A public health catastrophe is a health effect so powerful that even an epidemiological study can detect it. It's very important to realize that most epidemiological studies will not really show results. For example, let me just give you a simple story. Suppose you had a mass murderer in your community who's going around killing people. Okay? Well, probably the people who are killed do not amount to a statistically significant number of deaths. In other words, if you compare the murders with all the people who die from other causes, it's not statistically different. It's just a little increase, a little tiny increase. And it could be, that increase could be due to an epidemic of flu or something rather than murder. So what I'm telling you here is that this gentleman is giving you some strong advice here. He's saying epidemiological studies are not going to reveal something unless it's really bad, okay? And also, if the population is rather small, then it's very difficult to get what's called statistical significance. Now, what is statistical significance? Is this okay to make some general comment? They always say, well, this is statistically not significant. So, for example, there have been many studies done in Canada where in every case they've looked at leukemia incidents around nuclear power stations in Canada, and every study that I've looked at shows more leukemia than would normally be expected. But in every case, it's not statistically significant. Okay? Now, the point is that this is a tool that the industry uses to say there's no health effects, which is not the right conclusion. It's not the right conclusion. The right conclusion is that there isn't a good enough study, that you need to have a better study in order to see the health effects. Now, that's exactly what happened in Germany. How many people have heard about the KIK study, the K-I-K-K study? That was a huge study. They studied the populations, a very huge population study, around 17 nuclear reactors in Germany. And they found, and they measured the distance between children living from reactors at different levels, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, from all of these 17 reactors. And they found in every case, they found that within 5 kilometers, there was more than a doubling of leukemia among children under 5 years of age. So now that was statistically highly significant. And they said, we can't explain why this is happening, but this is statistically significant. But you can imagine how difficult it is to carry out a study of that type. And by the way, this was the most powerful kind of study. It's called a case control study. It means that for every person who had, for every child who had leukemia, they matched that child with another child who did not have leukemia but otherwise had the same characteristics. So what I'm telling you here is that these epidemiological studies, to be done properly, they require large populations, they require money, a lot of money, and they require, and even then, it's very difficult to get, you cannot guarantee that you're going to get what are called statistically significant results. Now, I can say more about what statistically significant means because I've been dealing with this in Canada. We've analyzed some of the studies that were done in Canada and found that although the industry said they were statistically not significant, in fact, they were statistically significant. And I can explain that later. It's because of what's called a one-tailed test versus a two-tailed test. All of this is a bit technical, but what's most important for people to understand is don't be bamboozled by an industry study which claims that there's no statistical significance. The real question is there an increase or is there not? And then from there you can talk about what is significant, what is not significant.
Can you describe the description between these three studies? Here's what's up on the screen.
Okay, now I am not a statistician, although Michael says that I'm a mathematician, which is true. I'm not a statistician, which is a different animal. Rosalie Hotel, who passed away just this year, she was a fantastic woman, and she was a mathematician and a health scientist, and she worked originally at the Roswell Park Memorial Institute studying cancer in a tri-state region. She participated in what's called a tri-state study, and she got some real insights into, she really brought her brain to work on the numbers. And she noticed things that the studies don't automatically show you. And one of the things she found was that not only was there a statistically significant increase in cancer among children who were x-rayed at an early age, and she had a large population to deal with. Rosalie. But she was able to establish certain patterns that really colored her perception of what radiation does. These were x-rays originally she was doing. She was studying x-rays. Later, after learning her experience at the Roswell Park Memorial Institute, she then became one of the tireless crusaders in the field of nuclear energy and people who were exposed to radioactivity. Different from x-rays, but she had similar insights about the effects of radiation. And so she became a very well-respected member of many commissions, including the International Joint Commission, including the British Columbia Medical Association Environmental Committee, including various UN bodies. She also participated in setting up tribunals, investigating the effects of Chernobyl, for example, and she traveled to very far and wide. I went with her once on a trip to Korea, and we toured the nuclear reactors in Korea and gave talks to people there. She was a tireless worker and a very careful worker. She established the International Institute for Concern for Public Health, the International Institute of Concern for Public Health, which is still going on, but with a tremendous loss, because Rosalie is literally irreplaceable. So, along with Barry Commoner, I think Rosalie Hotel is has been a giant in the field of radiation effects and so on.
Since we're on Rosalie, why don't I just say a little more about Rosalie? I'm just going to say a little more about Rosalie and then we'll jump back into this, but this was her area. She always said to me, when I said there's too small, they say it's too small of a population to find any health effects, she said, well, they're just not looking right. And unfortunately, she died before she taught me how to see that. So we have to figure that out. She was born, I'm just going to give you a little bio of Rosalie. She was an internationally recognized environmental epidemiologist, cancer researcher, public health advocate. She died June 14th, 2012 at 83 years old. And she entered the field of cancer research at Roswell Park Memorial Institute in Buffalo in the 70s, where this is part of this is taken from a bio done by of her, a woman who translated her latest book into German. Planet Earth, the latest weapon of nuclear war, is her latest book. And her first one was No Immediate Danger, which is pretty much one of the best books for people to read when they're first getting into learning about radiation and health. She was on the Roll of Honor in 1993 in the United Nations Environment Program. She won the Right Livelihood Award, the alternate Nobel Peace Prize in December of 1986, along with Alice Stewart. She received numerous degrees and honorary doctorates and worked around the world from Bhopal to the Bikinis, to the Marshall Islands, and many different, mainly radiation-affected communities, helped with communities and individuals who were struggling with the health effects of radiation. She was very outspoken, and the first time I met her was at West Valley at the hearing on solidifying high-level radioactive waste.
All right, so let's just talk about the three major types of studies, epidemiological studies. An ecological study is one that simply looks at a given population and tries to, you have to be able to measure the exposure that people are getting in some way. This is not easy because, well, even for workers, it's not always easy to find out what radiation they've actually been exposed to. They may wear dosimeters, for example, but how much radiation, how much radioactivity have they got inside their bodies? Do we know how much they have inside their bodies compared with what this badge on the outside of their body measures? In the case of Japan, for example, how many citizens do you think have had their radiation exposures measured? Do we know how much exposure this individual received from the Fukushima accident? Or what this child might have received from the Fukushima accident? This is not an easy thing to do. So an ecological study requires that you have some measurement of exposure, and then you can compare that with the incidence of a disease, such as leukemia, for example, or some other disease. And if you can show a correlation that between exposure and disease, then you have established a possibly significant result. By the way, this is how John Goffman started. He took the population of Navajo miners down in the Four Corners area of the southwest United States, and he took these miners, and they only had rough estimates of how much exposure they got based upon measurements in the mine. But what he did was he divided them into 5 categories, A, B, C, and D, where he knew that B worked longer and in more dangerous areas, C worked even longer and in more dangerous areas, and so he could at least get a rough idea of who got more exposure than anybody else. And what he found was that it was absolutely amazing that the higher the radiation exposure for these groups, the higher the incidence of lung cancer. So the lower group got a certain increase in lung cancer, the next group got that much more increase in lung cancer, as well as that much more radiation. The next group again, and the next group, and so on. So he established the first crude linear relationship between dose and result. And that convinced him that low levels of radiation could not be written off as being harmless, because the implication was that as you lower the dose, fewer people get cancer, but the people who get cancer are just as dead. And so you're still killing people, you're just not killing as many people. And this means that lowering the dose, if you're exposing a large population, does not mean you're doing no harm. So that's what an ecological study is. A cohort study is really looking at the relative risk, more or less the ratio, between an exposed group and an unexposed group. So you have 2 cohorts. You have one cohort which is exposed to radiation at a certain level, and another group which is not exposed. And this has to be carefully chosen so that there are other, you're trying to eliminate your confounding factors. For example, if you had one group in a city and one group in the country, that would not be a good cohort study, because the people in the city are exposed not only to radiation, but to more pollution of other kinds, pollution from neighboring factories and so on. So you have to have a cohort that is established that is otherwise as similar as possible. And then you look at the relative risk between these.
So can you even do that now that Fukushima blew all over the place and bomb testing? Are there any unexposed populations to compare to?
Well, for example, you could try and compare somebody from that end of the island with a cohort from the other end of the island. If you go to a cohort that is far away from Fukushima, then at least you have some basis for comparison. The case control study is one where, and this is the kind that was done in Germany, where you look at a very careful study. It requires a lot of work, where every case of incidence of a disease is carefully matched with case controls, with controls who do not have the disease, but who otherwise have very, very similar characteristics in terms of where they live, in terms of how their age is, and so on and so on. So that's the best kind of study. That's the one that gives you the sharpest results.
I mean, in addition to studies, there are also other kinds of comparisons that can be done, which would be surveys and monitoring, environmental monitoring, and, well, just not, yeah, and this sort of describes, and the other thing had little, yeah, do the next one. Yeah, so some of these are more expensive, and there are pros and cons to doing these studies. As Gordon said, doing studies can give the false impression that there's nothing there. I have that problem when I'm using a radiation detector that's not real sensitive and go around and say, oh, well, it's not showing anything, so there's nothing here. And then comparing it to a time when I rented a $15,000 multi-channel analyzer, and I took my regular detector and held it next to the multi-channel analyzer, and this was at Mound here in Ohio, and the regular detector was showing nothing, and the multi-channel analyzer said, yeah, here's the background, and what's giving background is uranium-238 and all kinds of other isotopes that were attributed to Mound, and so you have to be careful. And so there are these various different types of studies, and some are, might give you less information, but they also you're at less risk. Some are more expensive, some are cheaper.
The causal model, you can't prove it, can't prove it, can't prove it. Came from that nuclear power plant, you got a coal burning plant, giving off radiation, you got a chemical plant, you got this, that, and the other, y'all smoke, y'all drink, you know, it's all your fault. The causal model, you can't prove things. You can eliminate other hypotheses. You could do control groups, a community that has a nuclear power plant, one that doesn't have a nuclear power plant. Rarely are you able to get a good control group of good research design where you can actually take logic and generalize your findings, rule out things that it wasn't caused by this, it wasn't caused by that, and start to point at the culprit. And so we did this in Monroe. Actually, we just did this in January. Yeah, we hired an epidemiologist, a public health, master's in public health, Joseph Mangano. And he'd take a look at the community of Monroe. And what he found was that the community of Monroe had a 31% below national average on cancer prior to 1985. So the Fermi nuclear plant started firing up in 85, went to commercial operation in 88. And so what Joseph did was he looked at data pre-Fermi 2, post-Fermi 2. And so a community that went from 31% below national average on cancer went to 60% above national average within a short span. So the utility, so we published this, and we got some media hits on it. So the utility's response was, oh no, that's old data that he used. He used old data from 2008, 2009 data from CDC. Essentially huge databases. So if there's something to be found, it's likely to be found when you get a large number. It can prove statistically significant. So he was able to correlate the elevation in cancers in Monroe precisely with the years of operation of Fermi. There's a lag variable. It takes, you get exposed, and it takes a while for the cancer to manifest itself in the health effect. But a pretty crisp, clean, good research design where he compared years pre, post, and also that he looked back at the years that the Fermi 2 was or the Fermi 1 was operating. And he found the same kind of pattern. Of course, the utilities got much more money than we had, and of course they did a lot, you know, rebutted our study. But the bottom line is you can't prove it. We can't prove it. We can show there's an association with the years that ran, a correlation. But the causal model, unless you have truly an experimental design, which rarely exists in the real world. So it's tough to prove. But what we're using this, it's a tool to start to look. I mean, if you look at, up and down the block, oh, my neighbor's got thyroid. You get these anecdotal stories out near the Fermi plant, around the estuaries, just on the north of the plant. A woman says, everybody's got thyroid, they all got thyroid things going on. They got, had the thyroid cancer, they had the thyroid worked on. So you start to hear these stories, and so, okay, is it just an anomaly, or how do we weave these stories together? And how do we set up a baseline community health study? So one of the things we were asking for in our intervention at the Fermi 3, and of course we were denied, but one of the things we were trying to ask for was, all right, you want to build a nuclear power plant, then you need to establish what is the baseline health now in this community. So if there is an impact, we need to know going forward. But we don't do science. And I opened up this conference with, the atom has subverted science. We don't even collect the data. My God, why would you want to collect the data? Because if you did, then somebody might be culpable. So we're not even doing science. So this is an invitation to barefoot, go out there, start to put things together, start to see patterns, and start to read, consult with Joseph McDonald, with some of us, and start to see, okay, how can we empower ourselves? Is there something going on here? Now, over just west of us, there's 2 communities that have cancer clusters. There's the Clyde community, which is southwest of here, and then there's Port Clinton, which is due west of here. But in the neighborhood, you've got Davis-Besse. In the neighborhood, you've got Plumbrook reactors. In the neighborhood, you've got chemical factories. In the neighborhood, you've got farmers. In the neighborhood, you've got pollution blowing over from the basin. How do you separate, how do you ferret out? Well, when numbers start going up, and in fact, the EPA was brought in, and they looked at Clyde, and they looked at 14 different variables, I believe, 14 different potential culprits. But to my knowledge, they did not look at radiation. I'm not saying that's the culprit, but we need to start investigating. We need to start laying down some markers and to start to gather and start to ask the questions of the community and just empower ourselves, because we can get there. And so this is a how-to, and invite you to do that. And with that, unless anybody's got any burning thing to say, but these are much shorter than yesterday's workshop, so if we can, unless you got something burning, let's get to the Q&A.
Okay, real quick.
Well, I wanted to say that it's the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice that has more of a program than our groups on doing this kind of work. And so, Center for Health, Environment, and Justice out of Lois Gibbs, Ann Ray, Stephen Lester out of Northern Virginia.
John Goffman said radiation is the perfect crime. Deaths from radiation. He said that the problem is that we know for sure that people are being killed by low-level radiation. And I'm referring here to atomic radioactivity. We know for sure that what the culprit is. So we know the weapon, we know that people are being killed, but in every individual case, we can't prove it. So it's the perfect crime. Nevertheless, how do we know that it's happening? Well, read the Beer 7, or well, this is not an easy one to report, or not an easy report to read. But the Beer 7 report from the National Academy of Sciences confirms that what they've been saying in the last 6 reports is more clear than ever, that all the scientific evidence is pointing in the same direction towards the fact that there's no safe level of radiation. That the linear hypothesis, which means that as you lower the dose of radiation to a population, you will see fewer cancers, but you will still see cancers, extra cancers. And as you expand the population exposed, for example, if you cut the dose in half, but double the population, you'll see just as many cancers. And that's what the linear hypothesis says.
I absolutely, since we're talking a little bit more about radiation here, and you mentioned Beer 7, the National Academy's report, my colleague Mary Olson went through and looked at some of the charts, and this is something that Dr. Rosalie Bertel also helped with. If you look at the charts in the effects, the health effects versus the amount of radioactivity that the National Academy of Science team looked at, you see that women are 50% more vulnerable than men, and children even more so than that. They did some charts where they compared males, females, and then in different age groups. So baby girls, little girls, are the very most vulnerable, and so for both deaths and for incidences of cancer, and that's all they look at the National Academy. They don't even look at all of the other health effects. But women are 50% more harmed by the same amount of radioactivity, which means that our radiation protection standards are only protecting the white males within the 20 to 30, the standard male, the 20 to 30 range. So we need to be pushing for protection of the entire population, and that includes women, and that includes children, and the most vulnerable. So, do we have time for questions?
We can take some questions. But the favorite thing of the industry to do is to say, okay, we'll do a health study. Let's see, the fermenting plant's located here. Okay, we'll include this county and this county and this county, and then dilute the study with people that are not an exposure path. So they have a huge number, and so it gets normalized. It looks like there's no pattern there. So with that, let's go to some Q&A, and we'll try to field it.
I just want to know, have you guys gotten access to the American Registry of Radiologic Technology? They've got a study that's been ongoing since about 1970 of radiation, medical radiation workers. And it's, I'm part of it, and probably 5,000 or 10,000 people are part of it. That data might be
available for public consumption. I don't know, but they certainly could be
Is it again American what?
American Registry of Radiologic Technologies.
I don't know about it.
Yeah, it's been ongoing from the early 20th century, as a matter of fact. I think it goes back that far, when the radiologists were the first group that really, because they worked with radioactive and radiation all the time, they were the first group that really noticed that their own practitioners are in danger, and so they kept careful studies. That was actually the origin of the idea.
This is a new study, though, that has been going on,
yeah.
That they started at a particular date.
There was also a very large study of atomic workers in nuclear plants that was done worldwide, and that showed even though all these workers were well below the so-called permissible level, nevertheless there was a definite, statistically significant increase in cancer and leukemia. Small but significant.
And we're going to be having a listserv of people who attended the conference, so we could actually get a dialogue going about this on the listserv. If Robert wants to lead such a dialogue.
Do I know how to lead a listserv?
Sure.
Which button?
That's the barefoot part.
I wanted to mention the President's Cancer Panel report, which is a very user-friendly document that while it does not focus on nuclear power, it mentions nuclear medicine, use of radiation in hospitals and medical offices, etc., and highlights it as a cause of cancer and the need to control that. So the President's Cancer Panel report was a very important report for those of us who work on toxins in the environment, and I think for this group, it's certainly a user-friendly, public-friendly document that talks about radiation and its implications.
Could you give us the link for that? Or
I can certainly send it around when we do this.
When we do the listserv.
Yeah, it's a very good document if people are not aware of it.
And we have
7 is complicated. This is much more accessible.
And we'll have a sociologist on our listserv who could help us with the research design. Mr. Jerkovac. Doctor.
Can you guys help on clarifying, I'm talking about Big Rock Point, one of the early and dirtiest emitters because it was experimental, they could just vent. And up in the Charlevoix, Petoskey, downwind areas, high incidences, you are familiar with the Gerald Drake study, doctors started noticing low birth weight babies, leukemias, thyroid, different things going on. They started documenting. Kate could probably speak better to this, but that study just got poo-pooed by consumers, proved it, but in the meantime, the incidences of cancers in downwind areas like East Jordan, amongst the Anishinaabe up there, large breakouts of, different things. Anecdotally, I was playing at Albion College one year and played the Big Rock song. A student came up, he said, we moved to Charlevoix, my family, and my two brothers were both born after that time. They moved there, and they both had leukemia. They lived about 2 miles from the reactor. He says, is there any, I said, boy, that's one of the key indicators, is childhood leukemia. But this National Academy of Science study, commissioned by the NRC to study these plants, can you just touch on what that was and what is going on now about it? Because, it's really important up there. People are going, oh, geez, you mean they're actually going to start investigating the long-term effects?
There was a National Academy of Sciences first part of a two-part study that was commissioned by the Nuclear Regulatory. First off, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was going to get one of its typical scientific lackeys to do a health study around nuclear reactors to update the one that was done, I believe, around 1988, 89, 90 timeframe. The UNSCEAR, United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, did a review of nuclear reactors in the U.S. and supposedly a health study, and they made many, many clearly bad assumptions and came up with the conclusion that there's no real problem. But it was very much attacked. Anyway, that was a while back, so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission wanted to do something that would be more updated, and when we found out about it, the organizations who track these issues attacked and said, we do not want you to have... Kevin, do you remember who it was that was going to do that study? It was one of the agencies that they typically go to, and so we were able to prevent...
Oak Ridge.
Yeah, Department of Energy at Oak Ridge, one of their teams. And so it was taken from that, and then it was given to the National Academy of Sciences, which is often, on its radiation work, very, very biased. They set up teams that are designed to not find things. And so the National Academy did take this on with a lot of public scrutiny and oversight. And the report came out stating what some of the scientific principles that would need to be involved, would need to be included in any study that is done. And what Kevin told me is that are they not proceeding with that? This is something that Beyond Nuclear has been tracking a little more closely than NEARS. But we got to be really careful. If the National Academy is doing an NRC-funded study of health effects of its licensees, obviously, and they have a lot of influence, and they provide the information, we've got to stay on top of it. So Kevin's going to talk.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I was just going to add, my understanding is from Cindy Folkers, who's our point person on this issue. And the NRC commissioned this thing at the NAS, and there was too much scrutiny. They wanted a whitewash. Just as an example of that, NRC has a study of its own in-house called SORCA, State-of-the-Art Reactor Consequence Analysis, which is its rewrite of the CRAC-2 study from 1982, which was consequences of calculation of reactor accident consequences, which they tried to hide because the casualty numbers and the property damage numbers were so shocking in that 1982 report. So now they're rewriting that study, and they're going to find no casualties and no property damage due to catastrophic radioactivity releases, because they're going to assume no radioactivity escapes. So that's the NRC's attitude towards this stuff. And my understanding, and again, Cindy is our point person, is that this National Academy of Sciences study was getting too accurate, too truthful. They were using models that were too reasonable.
They weren't going to be able to rig it as well because people were paying attention.
So guess what?
So-
NRC doesn't want to fund the next step, which is to carry it out.
The NAS study initially was going to be chaired by Mr. Dick Meserve, who is a ex-nuclear regulatory commissioner, who at the time he was appointed to chair the committee, or the study, served on the board of not one but 2 utilities that own nuclear power plants. And he was busted for this and asked to be removed and was not too happy about that.
So he's not on the panel that did the actual study, but he's still on the board that is commissioning the panel. He's a National Academy of Science board member on it, is my understanding.
So the atom again, subverting science.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Big Rock was our own little Hanford in Michigan. Over the first, over its lifetime, it released over 3 million curies of radioactive ionizing and fission gases. And when they did the study, when Dr. Drake did the study, one of the things he found was there was a 21% increase in low birth weight babies compared in Charlevoix County compared to the state of Michigan, a 1% increase in low birth weight babies. They went to the state of Michigan, and instead of the state of Michigan Health Department doing a study, they called in Argonne, which is the Department of Energy, and they came in and did the study, and they said that it was due to poverty. It had nothing to do with that. So.
Also, one of the activist people in the area told me years ago, he said, how many insignificants does it take to make a significant?
That's actually a very good question, because let me explain the concept of significance. The concept of significance is that if you have an average, suppose there's an average incidence of leukemia, okay? And suppose you take a group of people and you find it's above average. You say, well, that could just be a fluke. You know, like some are going to be above average, some are going to be below average, right? So you find another group and you find it's below average. You say, there, you see, it balances out. Because otherwise, how could you get the average, right? Now, the thing is that if you study a population and get so far above average, that probability means that you wouldn't expect to see that. 95% of the time, you'll not see those results. Then that's called 95% significance, and that's what they look for. So that they have a way of calculating probabilities, and they say if you were just taking samples, and you got some samples above and some samples below, if you get a sample where the amount is so large that there's a 95% probability you would not get that by chance, then you say that's significant, okay? Now 95% is arbitrary. If it's 80%, then that's a different level of significance, or 99% is a different level of significance. So what's significant is really decided by the planners of the study. If it's an increase, it's still an increase. Now, the way you can confirm it with a low population is if you take repeated samples, and they're always above average, then you say, well, that's significant. So even though you may not achieve 95% significance on one study, you may find that by taking repeated studies, you find over and over again that you're getting above average. Well, that alone is significant. So this is the point, is that you have to understand what significance means. And you can establish significance in different ways. And the conventional way that they, and I'll explain one other thing. And that is that when in Canada, they did a study around Pickering about incidence of leukemia in children, okay? And they found it was not significant. But they were using the wrong test. The test was, how significant is it that the level of leukemia would be above or below average? And they found out that using that's called a two-tailed test. And using a two-tailed test, they said that these results, even though they're above average, they're not significant. They were using the wrong test. They should have been using a one-tailed test. A one-tailed test is what is the probability of getting this many just above average? Forget about below average. We're not interested in that. What's the probability of getting that many above average? It turns out that the very same data, without any new data, indicated that that is significant. That was more than 95% improbable to get that many cancers. So there's all kinds of sneaky things that go on with this business, and the main point is to try and bamboozle people. So you have to be careful about that. My main experience in dealing with these studies is not conducting them, which is not easy, but rather critiquing them. Critiquing them is sometimes, you can make headway sometimes on that.
It's still the safest form of energy we have.
Precious tritium is the fuel that makes this project.
Tritium into the ground. So they were testing for tritium.
Yeah.
Yet residents were not warned.
Oh, I'm losing my life because of you people.
Residents have so much fear that federal regulators overseeing Exelon's handling.
It's called tritium, often used in thermonuclear weapons. It's
the tritium extraction facility and the RTF.
Tritium, which is a radioactive substance that causes cancer and other forms of death.
With free oxygen to form tritiated water, which...
Mutations, like these extra eyes I have.
And from that standpoint, it's quite impressive.
Safely exists.
If we continue the way we're going, we'll be able to help shepherd in the next nuclear generation.
This nuclear thing, with the shit, the meltdown and all that,
Radioactive tritium is leaking from 3/4 of all U.S. commercial nuclear power sites. The cancer-causing material often seeps into groundwater from corroded buried piping.
You know what happens? Meltdown. Total meltdown.
Will be sounded by beams of maroons like this.
Vermont Health Department has been monitoring the nuclear plant's tritium level.
Neighborhood nuclear superiority.
Introducing the new tritium duo from Triclin.
There is good and bad.
I called in there, and they really helped by inflating my natural paranoia and reinforcing my territorial imperative. And you know what? This tactical nuclear warhead just attached to my garden hose. Ordinary hand tools.
Hi y'all, it's Miss Tritium. I just wanted to introduce myself. Well, it's Miss Tritium. Well, it's Miss Tritium.
Once again, on the zombie apocalypse survival plan.
So, in the backspace there, well, something crazy with some tritium right in there.
Nuclear regulators were calm and collected when they told this group in Brattleboro that radioactive tritium from Vermont Yankee is probably going to wash into the Connecticut River.
The issue is not to be afraid of radiation. The issue is to understand it and to respect it, just like any other energy source.
Nuclear energy is America's largest source of clean air electricity. So, nuclear energy can provide Made in America electricity while protecting the environment. Nuclear.
At last, our plan to make the public believe we are doing something to save the climate, blah, blah.
What are some of the things that you noted from that little piece of social media activism?
Humor.
Humor.
Fast pace.
Fast pace, like every 5 seconds a different image.
Not a detailed, thorough,
right? No
well-reasoned,
speech.
footnoted discussion.
Yes, not a well-reasoned footnoted discussion. I'm just going to repeat in case people didn't hear it. Anyone, any other comments?
No information.
No real information. You sort of wanted more, right? Yeah, I wanted more information.
I thought the graphics were good. I think that
good graphics.
The problem might be though that it was kind of trippy, but it kind of, if you didn't know how serious it was, oh, after you saw that, you might just brush it off like Tritium, you know.
Didn't get a sense of the seriousness
of
it.
No.
It reminded me kind of like the Simpsons jokes. You get a concept that it's bad, there's no reason to
right. Didn't go deep enough. Yeah, and that's maybe a weakness of social media actually, is that you just get little snippets.
Kind of good though, because it makes you want to question more.
Yeah, and it's going to attract a different audience.
Yeah. It's going to attract the young audience with that fast.
And it's going to attract youth, because their whole attention span thing with all of their different applications and telephone and texting and everything is all really short snippets, right? I find as an organizer, Facebook is really valuable to create an event, share it with all your Facebook friends, and then you can also grab the link for the event and send it to your traditional email contacts. So I see social media, all the different platforms, Twitter, Facebook, email, blogging, websites, email lists, listservs, Skype, they're all complementary to your grassroots organizing. And the more of them you use, the more different audiences you're going to reach. 200 million people use Twitter. Who uses Twitter? Fewer. And do you find it as valuable as Facebook?
I like it more because I choose the people that I want to follow. So if there's someone in the news that I like to keep up on, I can just type in their name and finds them. When they post something, they find an interesting article, they put a link in there to that. I can click on that link and my browser will automatically pull that up. It's very convenient, fast, and informational. Facebook is, you know, it doesn't seem like it has the depth of information.
Right. How about blogging? Who blogs?
What was his main point?
His main point is that he likes Twitter better because he can follow particular people and slightly different information. It's a little bit more intellectual. Facebook is more personal. And I even thought about actually creating a little YouTube video right here. Who uses a camera to upload photos and share them? And how about who uses a camera to upload video and share that? And I think this is a very valuable tool. So for example, you go to your city council meeting and you make a presentation or wherever, a political event, or you see a politician on the street, you whip out your video camera. This camera cost me $200. It's so small, it just fits in a pocket. It's got an internal microphone, you flip it on, start recording, it's so inconspicuous. So you're right here, you're talking to Gordon and you're asking him some questions, and he's just recording. And it takes, 4 minutes. You close it, you pop out the card. It's so simple. You pop out the card, you pop it into its little adapter, you plug it in your computer. You have a YouTube, an account. You have to have a YouTube account, but that's easy. You spend the first time you use YouTube to set up your own account. That means you can upload stuff. You don't need an account to watch video, but you need an account just to set up. It's free, yeah?
If you have Google, you already have a YouTube account.
Oh, I didn't know that. If you have Google, you automatically have a YouTube account. And you just plug in as if you were going to pop in a still photo, you pop in a video photo essentially, and it uploads it, and you save it, and there it is. And sometimes you can just leave it there, but then you grab the link and you pop it in your Facebook page and you say, hey everybody, check out this video of me interviewing Gordon Edwards. And then the opportunity is for that to go viral. It won't necessarily, and usually, you know, we all want it to, but usually it doesn't. It's kind of oftentimes disappointing. Like that Tritium video, I don't know, maybe you got a couple of hundred hits or views. But some videos really go viral. In fact, that's the potential. That was very instrumental in the Arab Spring and in the student movement in Quebec and in the Occupy movement. It helped really reach people that otherwise wouldn't be connected to those movements. That's our potential, and we need to use all of these tools. And I'm happy to see people are really using Facebook.
When you go to upload it, there's tags. It's like tags. Make sure you put as much information in there as possible, especially with video. Video will search higher on search engine optimization, so on that kind of thing. With still images, it does have metadata attached to it, but it's not the same. So when people go to search for it, then you're able to get your message out there. So the more data that you can enter in with your video is probably very helpful for your post. So.
You mean as you're taking your title, your keywords, exactly, your description, the keywords you put nuclear, your state, tritium, whatever, all is so that people who are searching for that item, it'll show up. Radioactivity, health. Yeah. So for all these things, it might be a little bit intimidating if you haven't, you know, set up your own account yet. And that's where involving youth, they know how to do all of this stuff. So to find a volunteer, this is a way to invite other people into the movement, is to give them an opportunity to use their skills. And they all know how to upload photos and to use videos with YouTube. They all know Facebook, Twitter. You know, as older activists, we need to train younger people in the movement, and we need to delegate. So for example, I can't do my own design of my leaflets. I can do really basic stuff, I can write it, I know the issues, but I get a volunteer, I put a thing out, I need someone to design a leaflet. There's lots of kids that know how to design leaflets, know how to use really basic, simple design programs. This is a perfect way to get them to plug in. Catherine does design work. We all need to be involving volunteers and paid support staff to broaden the movement. Instead of thinking we all need to do it all ourselves, learn to delegate.
I use Dropbox. Dropbox, that's you can put big files in there like videos and then share links with people.
Yes.
You can keep it private or you can make it public.
Yes.
So that's a nice feature. That works good.
Yes.
At the last conference I went to, I had a young man come up to me and say, "What's your Twitter feed?" This was the Twitter. And this was the CAN conference, and we didn't have one. And I was embarrassed because he wanted everybody to see what we were doing on Twitter. And so I made it a point, I'm going to learn how to do that. I don't do that now. And the same notion of as blogging, like I asked yesterday if everybody would sort of write up something and send it to someone. That's the old way. The new way is, I guess, is just typing what you think as it goes along. Maybe monitoring that a little bit, and then putting it out there. And I think we all really need to get into that. So.
Yeah, sharing more information. Who blogs, and can you recommend blog sites to set up your own blog?
There's one called Xanga, that's X-A-N-G-A.
X-A-N-G-A? WordPress.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a commonly used one.
Grange Hall Press is another one. Grange Hall Press.
Grange Hall Press.
I second WordPress.
WordPress.
It gives you the most information. If you don't know anything about anything, you can go in there.
It's simple.
Lots of ways to learn how to use it.
Great.
The person who set up my blog, you said the volunteer, set it up so that whatever I wanted would just drop down into Twitter, Facebook, and I think LinkedIn. So there are ways to do that and really get a handle on a lot for when you use the blog and to understand how that all works.
And once you're set up, like even with Facebook, once you've got your account set up, it really is quite simple for you to plug stuff in. Don't be intimidated. They're very, like, 800 million people are using Facebook. Do not be intimidated. You can figure it out. But again, I always have, young people, volunteers, friends in the movement who give me a lesson. So every once in a while I get them to come over and how do I set up an event? You know, really basic stuff, and then it becomes simpler. But get tutored, get that support. I think we'll watch a video now that Zach was intending to come to this workshop with us, and just at the last minute he pulled out. He was planning on co-presenting with me. So he said, but I'll put together a video instead and you guys can show it at the conference. So I haven't seen it, so let's watch it.
Are you scared? Well, you should be. Are you scared? Well, you should be. There's no backup plan. There's no safety net when Indian Point flows. So what do you think you'll get? 20 million panicked people all on the run. And there's Indian Point. It's the smoking gun. It's the smoking gun. It's the smoking gun. The CEO's spending our hard cash. Spending our hard money, drunk as devils, drunk as no forever power hungry. Those rubber bands, they live at night time to nail those numbers, call them so called Indian Point. Nail it tight, nail it tight, nail it tight, nail it tight. When the earth quakes and sits in the ground from scale to the other sound, those holy pots are evaporated, a core meltdown, a core meltdown, a core meltdown. Energy's got the NRC right in its pocket. It's only thing to do is shut it down, pocket. Terror raining from the skies, remember 9/11. Don't you ever forget that 1,000 souls that went to heaven, they went straight to heaven, they went straight. Heaven, they went straight to heaven. Solar panels, windmills, and generator sources, just to name a few. Alternative energy is the way to go. Let's give power back to the people. Just say no. So shame on you for missing the point. It's like a sitting duck. If we don't get together on this, we'll be plucked out of luck. We'll all be plucked out of luck. Yes, we'll all be fine.
Yeah, we should go back to Japan because in October we were in Sapporo and I applied kindergarten for her and she got a place. And now she's absent from April and she really wants to go there. I got it. So she really wants to go to kindergarten in Japan. So I think Sapporo is okay to survive if I really care about food. So we will go back to Japan soon.
Rosalie was in this world, but not of this world. It isn't so you are moral and impractical. And we may be immoral here, but we know reality. It is very clear that what is morally indefensible is dysfunctional in practical terms. War doesn't work, even if you want to. Exploitation doesn't bring results, even if you are the exploited. And we have seen, as companions of both, as part of the larger social movement, that in fact only what is morally defensible is in the end practical.
You know, how have you incorporated video into your activism?
Well, I find it's a complement to the work that we're doing. So when you send out an email, if you can also send a link, check out our latest video of the meeting, or or a link to the Facebook page where we're organizing an event, that can go to a whole different sector of the community. So it's a complement to our already existing organizing of literature, of banners, of flags, of selling merchandise. Social media adds so much and reaches different audiences.
And you're presenting at a conference this weekend?
I'm going this weekend to join all the people that we're speaking to right now in Ohio to talk about social media, to talk about how we can augment our campaigns by using a whole variety of different kinds of media sources. And I'm here the night before I'm leaving, just talking to Zach about what we could present together at this conference, even though you're not going to be there, Zach. All right, Zach.
Saves length there.
Saves
length there.
Yeah, exactly. Did you want to get him in on Skype?
Yeah, I'll see if I can get that.
So any other thoughts about social media that anybody wants to add?
It is a lot of work. You've got to coordinate where you put it, at what frame, when they're saying it, and things like that. So it adds quite a bit of work, but it can be done.
And it requires different software. Like what I described here, it's a crappy internal mic. For example, even he's doing one step ahead. He's got external mics here, and that requires more schlepping, and then you have to sync everything up. So with every increased stage, it requires more software, more skill. But we can all access this very simply on Facebook and Twitter.
One thing I would mention is that just recently there were a couple of television clips, and somebody just took their iPhone and just simply filmed it on their iPhone and then sent it by email, so that other people could see the clip who weren't in that area. And this way, for example, news events which are local, which don't get national coverage, can be blown out nationally. It's a very simple thing to just record it and then send it out.
And record if you're, talking to an elected official and they usually think that they're not being heard. To be able to record that and send it out, it is a very valuable tool for us as activists.
That I have a hard time seeing website addresses because I'm colorblind. And take that into consideration in your presentations. That, and I'm liking dark shades of red and green. And that's the most common of the colorblind. Total colorblindness, you're gone in most of the brochures. You've got to get contrasting things out.
Here we go with Zach.
Zach, you there?
Yeah.
Hey, all right. Hi, can you see us?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
You got the flag up. Can you? Yeah, we've got the flag up too.
1 second, I want to record this. Hi.
Hey, Zach.
Hi. So I missed that question, unfortunately.
So the question was, if you don't mind, already we're so inundated by email and computer commitments. Why would we also want to take on Facebook and Twitter and all the other social media opportunities when we can't even deal with email? Like, how do we divvy up the time? What are the priorities?
Well, that's exactly a problem. I think we're drowning in email. Angela, I know that you went away for about a week and you had 1,700 emails when you came back, or maybe it was 700. But the thing is with social media, that I know there's this critique out there that we're suffering from overproduction, and it'll just become data trash. But that's the problem with email. So social media can be all your media combined. When you make, a video at the end of your meeting, like a statement, you can just get that out instead of doing minutes that people won't even read. Like for me, I know I'll watch a 30-second statement of minutes, but I won't really look through the the detailed pages of meeting minutes from all the various groups that I'm in. And another thing is like writing all these letters to the NRC and stuff like that. We need to be campaigning. So another thing is that when you phone someone at the NRC, or you phone someone at Entergy or Exelon, and you want to get answers from them, record that phone call and then post it on a website called SoundCloud. There's lots of different sites like YouTube that host video, but sites that host sound. So if you want to say, look, I nailed them on this and I'm going to post my call and encourage other people to post their calls and stuff like that. It's about getting the eyes on these companies in terms of using the public use of reason. The nuclear industry is notorious for the private use of reason, but we need to make it public and we need to communicate it. So sometimes when you've got a video, you've got audio in that as well, you can give it to a local radio station. It's about campaigning and using social media to build a mass movement. And I think there's nothing that can replace building a mass movement. And social media these days is essential for popularizing a mass movement. We need to build numbers. So the last thing that I would say here is that one of the ways to do this is to connect in with other movements. Look at other movements that you see have already established social media, already have a culture of citizens journalism. So that means you don't have to find someone like me to do the social media. You start doing it yourself, but also social media can also be banners and posters and flyers. It doesn't necessarily have to be electronic, it has to be social. So I'd suggest get back to making buttons, you know, look through your own museum and archive of what worked visually, and then maybe just take a snapshot of that, take a picture of all the buttons you used to have, and put that picture up. It's about really pumping it out and really sharing it. My YouTube channel is called Fight Pollution, and I can distribute a link through Mike. I was with the Toronto Media Co-op. It's a site where anyone can join and post their own media. I don't really have a website right now, but I've been doing a lot of work with Indigenous land defenders in Six Nations. The land defenders in Six Nations were having a subdivision being built on their land, and they stopped that from happening, and they've stopped it for 6 years now. But there's a white rights group that are coming back onto the land to try and get them all arrested, so I've been doing video defense. So I like to stay near the front lines, and that's one of the things that I do is I work with all these different types of movements that are really struggling to link in the anti-nuclear movement to the land rights struggle and to other struggles where there's actually ground for fertile resistance.
Zach, you had talked about recording phone calls. I have a Samsung smartphone. Is there an app for that, or do I need some sort of device to hook on to record a cellular call?
You know what, I'm not familiar with Samsung, but I know there's one on the iPhone called Listen In, but I'm sure that the Samsung smartphone can do it because the iPhone can do it. But for people who don't have smartphones, and for people who you can just record on your computer, like let's say you're on a landline, just put it on speakerphone and then record it. Or put it on speakerphone and record it with a tape. And then the next time you see someone with a computer that knows how to just record something and upload it. And audio files can be very small, so they won't take up too much of your hard drive space. You know, recording these phone calls is good because you know how you're treated by these people and the PR bump that they give you. If we could just put that back, or you know what's an even good idea is not just a recording with like people, you know, the enemy camp, but phone someone from a couple states away or you know a couple towns away saying, hey, what are your Lulus, which are locally unwanted land uses? What's your struggle going on? Make it like a 5-minute conversation and then just post it, and then you're updating everybody on what's going on, right?
Any other questions?
So puppetry, making puppets, that would be a social media?
Oh, that's so social media. I would love to be making puppets. I think, did you guys see the video I produced for the conference here?
Yes, yes, yeah. Lovely, good work.
So that's just, I just put that together in about an hour this morning, and I guess with we had hats on that were cooling towers when we were doing our marching in the parade, and there we took up so much space, even though we were only 3 people. We had a massive felt banner, we had these big hats. So puppetry is exactly what you want to be doing. If you think of it in the other respect, though, that is what the nuclear industry is doing. It's puppetry of people on a mass scale. So if you can take the representation back into your hands, I'm all for puppets. I think it's, you know, if you can spend a day building a puppet instead of, you know, researching why nuclear is bad, to me, I mean, we have, you know, Rosalie Hotel's book, we have Caldicott's book, we have the research. We don't always need to continually spending all our time updating how contaminated we are. We need to build puppets to tell the stories to children. So I think that was one of the best questions I could have received. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of your puppetry.
Yeah, I just wondered, do you know, is there any like free online video editing software specifically for small size files or, you know, like internet, social networking?
The way that I would approach this is yes, there is. I'm not very familiar with it, but I would suggest instead of wanting to edit after the fact, just put out raw video. But don't put out raw video that's sort of like you've recorded 2 hours of a speech and you've got the start of the speech where it's like, we'd like to thank our hosts and the exit is over there and the bathroom is over there. There's so much self-congratulation that goes on when, you know, there's an introduction and stuff like that. Just tell yourself, look, this goes on all the time. There's nothing so special that I need to capture here. But what I want you guys to do is start your cameras rolling for 30 seconds. So just press stop at the end of 30 seconds, and then if you didn't catch what you want to catch, try it again, or ask the person that question again. Say, for the camera, can you say that question really quickly? And then that can reduce the need for editing. I mean, I should be taking that advice too. I have a huge bottleneck of all these things that I've been covering and all this sort of tritium tracking I've been doing in Pennsylvania. But it's really about getting these short little fragments out. So when the first question was a really good question, aren't we flooded in emails and why should we do more? The thing is actually we need to be kind of like doing more with less. You know, I mean, it's enough to say that, you know, this nuclear business is ridiculous. Like, there's a group in Ontario that spent months on a nuclear emergency plan for the Pickering and Darlington nuclear facilities. But I told them, look, we all know that the nuclear emergency plan is to head for the hills. Exactly. So sometimes you can be economical in your media.
Zach, it's Gordon here. Hi, how are you?
Oh, hi, Dr. Edwards. Nice to see you.
Listen, what about just real simple editing? Like, suppose you're not quite sure whether you caught what you want, right? So you let it run, but then later you want to just cut off the head and the tail and keep the juicy bite. Is there any simple way of doing that?
Well, yes and no, because YouTube does have a trimming function, so you can trim a video down to just a part of the timeline that you want. But what I would actually say is the easiest way to do it, and I've done this for friends and stuff like that too, sometimes I get calls from friends who say, look, the town council or the regulator has posted this video, and I want to use this little bit from the internet, but it won't let me download it. The easiest way is actually whip your camera out and then take a video of that video.
Right.
So it won't be the best quality, right? But the thing is that we don't need film best quality here. We need information and we need to share that information. So the thing is when you're taking a big file, you know, that'll really tie up your hard drive. But for you, Gordon, it would more be very simple video editing software that will let you do that. But there's so many ways around these problems. So I would actually say, let's say you've got this big video and you want to edit it. Pretend like you're on a VHS editor. Just take your camera once you're playing the video and just re-record from the screen and the sound exactly what you want. And you got it. It's not the best quality, but I wouldn't complain if it's information that I knew protected my safety.
Great, thanks.
Any last questions? Okay. Any last comments from Zach or anyone in the audience as we wrap up?
Thank you.
There was a thank you, Zach.
Thank you very much. You're all welcome to email me if you have a question, if you have a campaign. Like I've organized several successful campaigns. We shut down a tritium sign manufacturing operation in Peterborough, Ontario with the help of Dr. Edwards and Sierra Club Canada. And what we did was we started organizing around the kitchen table. I told them it'll be kitchen table meetings every Thursday, and if that doesn't work, we're going to take it up to pitchforks and torches. We haven't had to go to that yet, but you know what? There's plenty of ideas that I have, so if you want to email me about your campaign and how you might want to put out a little bit of tactical media, then you can get my contact from Angela or from Gordon or Mike, and thank you very much, and thanks for being there.
Thank you very much. If you have a Mac, you have some of the best editing software you can get for free on your Mac. And Windows, iMovie is amazing.
Yeah,
iMovie is amazing.
It is.
And it's free.
It's amazing.
It walks you through importing your video into it. And Windows also has the newer Windows, like Windows 7, has some free editing software also.